Norfolk, Virginia, 1995. The Miller family home stood as a testament to the American dream, a well-maintained two-story colonial with crisp white trim and navy blue shutters on a tree-lined street where military families predominated. The American flag that flew proudly from the porch moved gently in the autumn breeze, a symbol of the family's deep commitment to service and country. Commander James Miller had dedicated 23 years of his life to the United States Navy, rising through the ranks with a quiet determination that commanded respect, even in a system that had historically placed obstacles in the path of black officers. Inside the warmth of those walls lived Commander Miller, his wife Eleanor, and their only daughter, 17-year-old Tanya. The family photographs that lined the hallway told the story of their journey. James in his pristine uniform at various promotion ceremonies, Eleanor in her nurse's scrubs at the Naval Hospital, and Tanya growing from a bright-eyed child into a poised young woman with dreams as vast as the ocean her father sailed. Tanya Miller was everything a parent could hope for, studious and ambitious, with straight A's that had already secured her early admission to Howard University for the following fall. Her bedroom walls were adorned with pennants from historically black colleges and universities, alongside photographs of her track team victories and debate club awards. A poster of Mae Jemison, the first black woman in space, hung prominently above her desk, a daily reminder of what black women could achieve when given the opportunity. The crisp morning of September 17th, 1995, began like any other in the Miller household. The aroma of fresh coffee and Eleanor's famous buttermilk pancakes filled the kitchen as Commander Miller reviewed his daily briefing documents at the table, his reading glasses perched on the bridge of his nose. Eleanor moved efficiently between the stove and counter, her movements practiced from years of balancing motherhood with her demanding career as a pediatric nurse. Tanya entered the kitchen with her backpack slung over one shoulder, her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She wore her favorite blue cable-knit sweater, a birthday gift from her grandmother, over a white collared shirt and jeans. Small pearl earrings, also a gift from her grandmother, adorned her ears. "Morning, baby," Eleanor said, sliding a plate of pancakes across the counter. "You've got that calculus test today, right?" Tanya nodded, settling onto a stool. "At third period. I studied until midnight, but those derivatives still have me worried." Commander Miller looked up from his papers. "You've got this, Tanya. You've never met a math problem you couldn't solve." The familial warmth of the moment was interrupted when Tanya glanced out the kitchen window, her fork pausing halfway to her mouth. Across the street, partially obscured by his living room curtain, stood Richard Henderson. Even from this distance, Tanya could feel his eyes on her. The moment their gazes met, he stepped back, allowing the curtain to fall back into place. "He's doing it again," she said quietly, her appetite suddenly diminished. "Who's doing what, honey?" Eleanor asked, following her daughter's line of sight. "Mr. Henderson, watching our house, watching me." Tanya set her fork down, a shiver running through her despite the kitchen's warmth. "It's been happening for weeks now. Every morning when I leave for school, every afternoon when I come home. Sometimes I see him following me with his eyes when I'm just sitting on the porch reading." Commander Miller's expression hardened. "Are you certain, Tanya? That's a serious thing to say about a neighbor." "I'm not imagining it, Dad." Tanya's voice carried an edge of frustration. "At first I thought it was coincidence, but it's too consistent. Lisa has noticed it too when she comes over. He stares, and there's something wrong about the way he does it. Like he's hungry." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling exposed despite being in the safety of her home. Eleanor and James exchanged concerned glances. This wasn't the first time Tanya had mentioned Henderson's behavior, but it was the most detailed description she'd given. "Has he ever approached you? Said anything inappropriate?" Commander Miller asked, his military training kicking in as he assessed a potential threat to his family. "No," Tanya admitted. "He barely speaks to me. Just good morning or hello if we happen to cross paths. But it's his eyes, Dad. The way they follow me. It makes my skin crawl." Commander Miller's jaw tightened. I'll have a word with him this evening. This stops now. Please don't, Tanya said quickly. You'll just make it worse. He'll know I said something and then... She trailed off, unable to articulate the nameless fear that gripped her. Tanya, if someone is making you uncomfortable, we need to address it, Eleanor said gently. Your father won't create a scene. He'll just have a man-to-man conversation. Tanya nodded reluctantly, gathering her school things. I should go or I'll miss the bus. She kissed her mother's cheek, then her father's. I'll see you both tonight. We're still on for pizza and movie night, right? Wouldn't miss it, Commander Miller assured her, his smile returning. Your pick this time. I'm thinking waiting to exhale, Tanya said with a grin, knowing her father's preference for action films over dramas. Commander Miller groaned good-naturedly. If I fall asleep, don't hold it against me. I'll wake you for the good parts, Tanya promised, heading for the door. She paused before stepping outside, taking a deep breath as if preparing for battle. Eleanor watched through the window as Tanya walked down the front path, turning left toward her bus stop instead of right, the quicker route, but one that would take her directly past the Henderson house. The detour added 5 minutes to her walk, but Eleanor now understood why her daughter had started taking it weeks ago. James, she said softly, I'm worried. This isn't like Tanya to be so affected by something. She's always been so rational. Commander Miller stood, gathering his briefcase. I'll speak with Henderson tonight, respectfully but firmly. And I'll have a word with a friend at the precinct, see if there's anything we should know about our neighbor. Neither of them could have known that their conversation with Tanya that morning would be their last. By nightfall, their world would be irreparably shattered, and the name Tanya Miller would be headline news across Virginia. The day progressed with no indication of the impending tragedy. Commander Miller attended meetings at Naval Station Norfolk, discussing fleet readiness and upcoming deployments. Eleanor treated 3 cases of strep throat and a broken arm at the pediatric clinic. Neither received any calls from Tanya's school. It wasn't until 4:17 p.m., when Eleanor arrived home to an empty house, that the first whisper of unease crept in. Tanya was always home by 3:30, settled at the kitchen table with her homework and a snack. Eleanor called her daughter's cell phone, a recent gift for her 17th birthday, primarily for emergencies, but it went straight to voicemail. Tanya, honey, it's Mom. Call me when you get this. Just checking where you are. She called 3 of Tanya's closest friends, each of whom expressed surprise that Tanya wasn't home. According to Lisa Johnson, Tanya's best friend since elementary school, Tanya had seemed distracted during lunch, but had definitely boarded the bus after school. She was going straight home, Lisa confirmed. She mentioned movie night with you guys. She was looking forward to it. By 5:30 p.m., with still no word from Tanya and Commander Miller, due home any minute, Eleanor's concern had blossomed into full-blown fear. She called the school again, confirming that Tanya had attended all her classes and left campus on the regular bus. She called the bus driver, who remembered dropping Tanya at her usual stop. She got off alone, the driver recalled, headed up Maple Street like always. When Commander Miller arrived home at 5:45, the sight of his wife's face told him everything he needed to know. Tanya's missing, Eleanor said, her voice breaking on the words. She never came home from school. The next few hours passed in a blur of controlled panic. Commander Miller's military training took over as he methodically contacted local hospitals, Tanya's extended circle of friends, and finally the Norfolk Police Department. With each call that yielded no information, the knot in his stomach tightened. My daughter is missing, he told the desk sergeant at the Norfolk PD, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. 17 years old, last seen getting off her school bus at approximately 3:15 this afternoon. The initial response was measured, almost dismissive. Sir, teenagers often go off without telling their parents. Has she done this before? No, Commander Miller replied firmly. My daughter is not a runaway. She's never missed curfew, never disappeared without explanation. Something is wrong. Perhaps it was the certainty in his voice or his rank, or simply the fact that Tanya had now been missing for over 3 hours with no contact, but the sergeant's tone shifted. I'll send an officer to take a full report. In the meantime, continue calling her friends, check any places she might go if she was upset or needed space. By 8 p.m., the Miller home had become a command center. 2 police officers sat at the kitchen table, taking detailed notes as Eleanor and James provided every piece of information they could think of. Tanya's friends, her daily routine, her recent behavior, the clothes she had been wearing. A photograph of Tanya, taken just 3 weeks earlier at a family barbecue, her smile radiant and eyes bright with promise, was handed over to be distributed to patrol officers. "Is there anyone who might want to harm your daughter?" Detective Marcus Thompson asked. In his 15 years with the Norfolk PD, he had worked dozens of missing persons cases. Something about this one, perhaps the parents' obvious distress, perhaps the stark contrast between the missing girl's promising future and her sudden disappearance, had compelled him to take personal charge of the investigation. Commander Miller started to shake his head, then paused. "She mentioned that our neighbor Richard Henderson had been watching her, said it made her uncomfortable." Detective Thompson's pen paused over his notepad. "Watching her how?" "From his window, when she'd leave for school or return home. Staring at her when she was outside. She'd mentioned it several times over the past few weeks. In fact, we discussed it just this morning." "And how long have you known Mr. Henderson?" "He's lived across the street for about 8 years, Eleanor supplied. "He moved in a couple of years after us, keeps to himself mostly, works for the Postal Service, I believe." "Has he ever given you any reason to be concerned before your daughter mentioned this?" James and Eleanor exchanged glances. "Not really," James admitted. "He's always been polite, if somewhat distant. We've never been close with him, but there's never been any trouble either." Detective Thompson made a note. "I'll speak with Mr. Henderson. In the meantime, I'd like to see your daughter's room, if that's all right. Sometimes teenagers leave clues to their whereabouts, even unintentionally." Eleanor led the detective upstairs to Tanya's bedroom. It was meticulously organized. Textbooks and notebooks arranged by subject on her desk, clothes neatly hung in the closet or folded in drawers. The bed was made, hospital corners crisp in a reflection of her father's military influence. Nothing appeared out of place or disturbed. "May I?" Detective Thompson asked, gesturing to Tanya's desk. Eleanor nodded, watching anxiously as he carefully went through her daughter's papers, her planner, her computer. In the planner, every assignment was noted, every test and quiz date circled in red. The computer revealed nothing unusual: school projects, college research, music playlists filled with Whitney Houston, TLC, and Boys and Men. "Mrs. Miller," Detective Thompson said gently, "I need to ask, has Tanya been having any problems lately? Issues with friends? A boyfriend? Trouble at school?" "No," Eleanor said firmly. "Tanya's always been focused on her studies. She has a solid group of friends, but no boyfriend that I know of. And she would tell me, we're close that way." Her voice caught on the last words. "Detective, my daughter didn't run away. Something has happened to her." As they descended the stairs, the front door opened and Commander Miller entered with another officer. His face was grim. "Henderson isn't home," he reported. "His car is gone. No answer at the door or on his phone." A chill ran through the room. It could be coincidence, a neighbor out for the evening on the same day a girl went missing, but no one present believed that. Not anymore. By midnight, the search for Tanya Miller had expanded significantly. Her photograph was distributed to all patrol units. Officers canvassed the neighborhood, questioning residents about anything unusual they might have seen that afternoon. The route from Tanya's bus stop to her home was searched meticulously, inch by inch, for any sign of a struggle, any dropped possession, any clue to what might have happened. Richard Henderson's home remained dark and empty. At 2 a.m., with no new information and exhaustion setting in, Detective Thompson encouraged the Millers to try to rest. "We'll continue searching through the night," he assured them. "I've put out a bolo for Henderson's vehicle. If he's in the area, we'll find him." But sleep was impossible. Eleanor and James sat in the living room, the lights on, jumping at every sound, hoping against hope that each car passing might be bringing their daughter home. The phone sat on the coffee table between them, ominously silent. "I should have listened to her sooner," Eleanor whispered, tears streaming down her face. "She told us something was wrong, and I just told her it would be fine." James took his wife's hand, his own eyes red-rimmed. "We'll find her, Eleanor. I promise you we will find our daughter." Deal. As dawn broke over Norfolk, bringing no news and no relief, the Millers faced the first of what would be countless days of agonizing uncertainty. The investigation was now officially classified as a potential abduction. Tanya's photograph appeared on local morning news broadcasts, accompanied by a description of her last known whereabouts and the clothes she had been wearing. By mid-morning, Richard Henderson had been officially named a person of interest. His photograph, showing a nondescript white man in his early 50s with thinning brown hair and wire-rimmed glasses, was released to the public alongside Tanya's. The contrast between the vibrant young woman with a promising future and the ordinary-looking middle-aged man created a chilling narrative that captivated the community's attention. Lisa Johnson arrived at the Miller home around noon, her eyes swollen from crying. "I should have walked home with her," she said, collapsing into Eleanor's arms. "She asked me to, but I had debate club meeting. If I'd just skipped it—" "This isn't your fault," Eleanor said firmly, though her voice trembled. "None of this is your fault." Detective Thompson arrived shortly after, his face showing the strain of a sleepless night. "We've located Henderson's car," he announced without preamble. "It was abandoned at Norfolk International Airport. Security footage shows him entering the terminal yesterday afternoon, but so far we haven't found evidence that he boarded any flights." "And Tanya?" Commander Miller asked, the hope in his voice painful to hear. "No sign of her at the airport," Thompson admitted, "but we're reviewing all the footage, every entrance, every exit." As the day progressed, the Miller home became a hub of activity. Navy colleagues arrived with food, offers of assistance, words of comfort that felt hollow against the enormity of their fear. The local black churches organized prayer vigils. The mayor made a public statement pledging all available resources to the search. Yet beneath this outpouring of support lay uncomfortable undercurrents. Some whispered that if Tanya had been white, the police response would have been swifter, more comprehensive. Others suggested that perhaps the military family wasn't as perfect as they appeared. Maybe there were hidden troubles that had driven the girl away, and a few wondered openly about the wisdom of a black family living in that particular neighborhood in the first place. These tensions became more evident when, 3 days after Tanya's disappearance, a search warrant was finally issued for Richard Henderson's home. The evidence was circumstantial. Henderson's unexplained departure coinciding with Tanya's disappearance, his car abandoned at the airport, the previous complaints about his behavior toward Tanya, but it was enough to convince a judge. What they found inside the Henderson home disturbed even the most seasoned officers. The house was immaculately clean, unnaturally so, as if recently and thoroughly scrubbed. In the basement, luminol testing revealed traces of what might be blood, though tests would be needed to confirm. But most disturbing was a hidden compartment in Henderson's bedroom closet, containing dozens of photographs of young women taken from a distance, at bus stops, entering shops, walking through parks, and among them several of Tanya Miller. The photographs showed Tanya in various settings, walking to school, sitting on her front porch reading, jogging with her track team. All taken without her knowledge, some from angles that suggested Henderson had followed her beyond their neighborhood. The most recent, dated just 2 days before her disappearance, showed Tanya looking directly at the camera, or rather, at the photographer. Her expression was one of dawning recognition and fear. "He was stalking her," Detective Thompson told the Millers, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Systematically, methodically. These photos go back at least 6 months. Commander Miller stood rigidly, military bearing barely containing his rage and anguish. "And you're just finding this now? After my daughter has been missing for 3 days? We needed probable cause for the search warrant, Commander. Without it, anything we found would be inadmissible." "And where is Henderson now?" Eleanor asked, her voice hollow. "We don't know. We've issued an all-points bulletin. His photo has been distributed to law enforcement agencies nationwide. But so far, nothing." The discovery of the photographs transformed the investigation. What had been a missing persons case with a person of interest was now a suspected abduction with a prime suspect. The FBI was brought in, adding federal resources to the search for both Tanya and Henderson. A deeper background check on Richard Henderson revealed disturbing information that had been missed in the initial investigation. He had moved frequently over the past 20 years, never staying in one location more than a decade. In 3 of his previous residences, young women had gone missing. None of those cases had been solved. "How was this not found before?" Commander Miller demanded when this information was shared. "How many other families are suffering because this man wasn't stopped?" "The previous cases weren't connected," Thompson explained, the weight of failure evident in his voice. "Different jurisdictions, different investigators. Henderson was questioned in one case but never charged. The connections weren't obvious until we had him as a suspect and did a deeper dive." As days turned into weeks with no sign of Tanya or Henderson, the case began to receive national attention. Tanya's photograph appeared on America's Most Wanted. Her story was featured on national news broadcasts. Henderson was added to the FBI's Most Wanted list. The Miller family established a foundation in Tanya's name, dedicated to improving the handling of missing persons cases, particularly those involving people of color. They spoke at conferences, lobbied legislators, and worked tirelessly to ensure that no other family would experience the systemic failures that had allowed Henderson to remain free, despite a pattern of suspicious behavior. 3 months after Tanya's disappearance, the first significant lead emerged. A motel clerk in rural West Virginia recognized Henderson from a television broadcast. He had stayed at the establishment for 2 nights in late September, traveling alone and paying cash. By the time authorities arrived, Henderson was long gone, but the motel room yielded critical evidence, a strand of hair that DNA testing confirmed belonged to Tanya Miller. The discovery was both heartbreaking and hopeful. It confirmed their worst fears. Tanya had indeed been taken by Henderson, but also suggested she might still be alive, at least as of late September. The search intensified in the West Virginia area, focusing on remote cabins and isolated properties where someone might hide a captive undetected. For the Millers, the confirmation that their daughter had been in West Virginia was a double-edged sword. "At least we know she was alive," Eleanor said, clinging to this slender thread of hope. "At least we know we're looking in the right places." Commander Miller had taken indefinite leave from the Navy, dedicating every waking hour to the search for his daughter. His once crisp uniform hung unworn in the closet, his military precision now channeled into organizing search parties, coordinating with law enforcement and maintaining the pressure of public attention on Tanya's case. The strain began to show in their marriage. Eleanor threw herself into her work at the hospital, finding solace in helping other children, while her own remained missing. James spent increasingly long hours at the foundation office they had established. Their conversations, once warm and easy, became brief exchanges of information about the case. The silence in their home, the absence of Tanya's laughter, her music, the sound of her footsteps on the stairs, grew more deafening with each passing day. 6 months after Tanya's disappearance, a local high school student made a disturbing discovery while working on an environmental project along the Elizabeth River. Partially concealed among the reeds and mud was a blue sweater, the same one Tanya had been wearing the day she vanished. Forensic analysis confirmed it was hers, and traces of blood were found on the fabric. The discovery reignited the investigation in Norfolk. Police divers searched the river, but no body was found. The area where the sweater was discovered was less than a mile from the Henderson home, suggesting that whatever had happened to Tanya likely began close to home. For Eleanor and James, the sweater represented their first tangible connection to their daughter since her disappearance. Eleanor held it carefully, wrapped in the evidence bag, and wept. "She loved this sweater," she whispered. "Her grandmother gave it to her for her birthday last year." The discovery of the sweater brought renewed media attention to the case. On the one-year anniversary of Tanya's disappearance, a national news program aired a special report featuring interviews with the Millers, Tanya's friends, and the investigators who continued to search for her. "We will never give up," Commander Miller stated, looking directly into the camera. "To whoever has our daughter, we will find her. And to Tanya, if you can see this, stay strong, baby girl. We're coming for you." The broadcast generated hundreds of tips, each of which had to be investigated. Most led nowhere, but a handful provided new avenues for the investigation. A truck driver reported seeing a young woman matching Tanya's description at a rest stop near Charleston, West Virginia, approximately 6 months after her disappearance. A waitress at a diner in rural Pennsylvania thought she had served Henderson, accompanied by a young black woman who seemed withdrawn and spoke only when directly addressed. These sightings, while unconfirmed, suggested a pattern of movement from Virginia to West Virginia, possibly into Pennsylvania. The FBI began focusing their search efforts along this corridor, checking remote properties, abandoned buildings, and areas where someone could keep a captive hidden from public view. 2 years passed. The Millers maintained their relentless search, though the toll on their health and relationship was evident to all who knew them. Eleanor had lost 30 pounds, her once vibrant face now gaunt with grief. James had aged a decade in 2 years. His hair now streaked with grey, deep lines etched around his eyes and mouth. Then, on the 3rd anniversary of Tanya's disappearance, an envelope arrived at the Miller home. It bore no return address, the postmark indicating it had been mailed from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Inside was a single Polaroid photograph of a young woman sitting in what appeared to be a cabin. Though her hair was different, cut short, dyed a lighter brown, and she looked thinner, her eyes were unmistakable. It was Tanya. She was holding a newspaper dated just 1 week earlier. Scrawled on the back of the photograph were 6 words. She said, "I looked at her strangely." The Millers' hope was rekindled with burning intensity. Their daughter was alive, at least as of 1 week ago. The photograph was analyzed for any clues to her location, the lighting, the furniture, anything visible through the cabin window. Experts determined it was likely somewhere in the Appalachian Mountains, possibly in western Pennsylvania or West Virginia. A massive search operation was launched, involving federal agencies now that the case clearly crossed state lines. Cabins and remote properties throughout the region were investigated. Henderson's background was scrutinized more thoroughly than ever before, revealing that his father had owned property in the mountains of western Pennsylvania. "This is it," Commander Miller told Eleanor, his eyes alight with determination. "We're close now. I can feel it." The search narrowed to a 50-mile radius in the Allegheny National Forest area. Aerial surveys identified several isolated cabins that were not on official property records. Teams of FBI agents, supported by local law enforcement, began methodically checking each location. 4 weeks after the photograph arrived, a task force raided an isolated cabin near the Pennsylvania-West Virginia border. What they found was both a resolution and a new mystery. The cabin showed signs of recent occupation: food in the refrigerator, clothes in the closet, a bed recently slept in. But it was empty of people. On the kitchen table was another Polaroid, this one showing Tanya standing beside a bus station locker. The message on the back read, "Find her before I change my mind." The bus station was identified as being in Pittsburgh. When agents opened the corresponding locker, they found a handwritten journal, Tanya's journal, filled with entries dated over the 3 years since her disappearance. It told a horrifying story of abduction, isolation, and psychological manipulation. Henderson had kept her confined, moving her between locations whenever he feared discovery. He had attempted to break her spirit, to make her dependent on him, to erase her identity. But the final entry, dated just days before, ended with words of determination. "I will find my way home. He's getting careless. He thinks he's broken me, but he doesn't understand who I am, Who raised me? Dad always said Miller women have steel in their spines. He's about to find out how right that is. The journal provided critical information about Henderson's patterns, his methods, and possibly his current location. According to Tanya's writings, he had mentioned a hunting cabin owned by his uncle, somewhere near a town called Riverside. There was no Riverside in Pennsylvania, but there was one in West Virginia, approximately 60 miles from the cabin where the journal had been found. A small team of FBI agents, including Detective Thompson, now working with the FBI task force full-time, headed for Riverside. Meanwhile, larger teams continued searching the areas surrounding Pittsburgh, where the most recent evidence had been found. Tanya Miller was found 3 days later, walking along a rural highway 20 miles outside Riverside. A local farmer spotted her and, recognizing her from news reports, immediately called the authorities. Physically unharmed but deeply traumatized, she was reunited with her parents in an emotional scene that brought tears to even the most hardened investigators. "I knew you wouldn't stop looking," she told her parents as they held her in the hospital room where she was being evaluated. "I knew you'd find me." Richard Henderson was apprehended attempting to cross the Canadian border a week later. The evidence against him was now overwhelming. Tanya's testimony, her journal, DNA evidence from multiple locations where he had held her, and connections to at least 2 other abduction cases in different states. As the full story emerged, it became clear that Henderson had been a predator hiding in plain sight for decades. He had targeted young women who caught his attention, stalking them before making his move. Tanya had sensed his interest before anyone else, her instincts warning her of the danger he represented. Her simple observation to her parents, "My neighbor looks at me strangely," had been the only warning before her world collapsed. According to Tanya's testimony, Henderson had approached her that September afternoon as she walked home from the bus stop. He had claimed there was an emergency at his house, a water leak threatening to damage the Miller's property as well, and asked for her help. Despite her misgivings, the urgency of his request and the potential threat to her family's home had overcome her caution. Once inside his house, he had overpowered her, drugged her, and kept her unconscious until they were far from Norfolk. The following 3 years had been a nightmare of captivity, moving from location to location as Henderson paranoidly feared discovery. He had controlled every aspect of her existence, what she ate, when she slept, what she wore. He had isolated her completely, keeping her away from telephones, computers, even windows in some locations. But Tanya Miller was her father's daughter. Throughout her captivity, she had maintained her sense of self, had observed her captor carefully, learning his patterns and weaknesses. She had kept a secret journal, documenting everything in case she died and it was found later. And she had planned, patiently and meticulously, for an opportunity to escape. That opportunity had come when Henderson, growing overconfident after years of successful evasion, had begun leaving her alone for short periods. He had been sending the Polaroids to the Millers himself, a twisted form of psychological torture, letting them know their daughter was alive but just out of reach. But in doing so, he had made a critical error, allowing Tanya to know that her parents were still searching, still fighting for her. In the years that followed, Tanya Miller showed remarkable resilience. Though she carried psychological scars that would never fully heal, she eventually returned to her education, graduating from Howard University with honors and going on to law school. She became an advocate for missing persons and abduction survivors, and helped pass legislation strengthening protections for potential victims and improving coordination between law enforcement agencies in missing persons cases. The Miller family's ordeal highlighted critical issues in how missing persons cases were handled, particularly those involving people of color. Their foundation worked to ensure that every disappearance received the attention and resources it deserved, regardless of race or background. Norfolk, Virginia would never forget the case that had exposed so many uncomfortable truths about prejudice, predators, and the vulnerability of communities. And parents everywhere remembered the chilling warning that had preceded Tanya's disappearance, a simple observation that, had it been taken more seriously, might have prevented years of suffering. My neighbor looks at me strangely. For in that ordinary neighborhood, on those ordinary streets, a monster had indeed been watching. And one young woman had the courage to see him for what he was, even before she became his victim. Her story would save countless others, her warning heeded in ways it once had not been, and in that, perhaps, lay the closest thing to justice that such a case could ever know. When Tanya Miller testified at Richard Henderson's trial, the courtroom fell silent, captivated by her quiet strength. "For 3 years, he tried to convince me I was nothing," she said, looking directly at the man who had stolen her youth. "But every day, I remembered who I was. I am Commander James Miller's daughter. I am Eleanor Miller's daughter. I am Tanya Miller. And no one, not Richard Henderson, not anyone, will ever take that away from me." Henderson was sentenced to multiple life terms without the possibility of parole. As he was led from the courtroom, Tanya stood tall, surrounded by her parents, her extended family, and the community that had never stopped searching for her. In that moment, she reclaimed not just her freedom, but her power. Years later, when asked how she had survived such an ordeal, Tanya's answer was simple yet profound. "I never forgot who was looking for me, and I never stopped looking for a way back to them." Her story became a beacon of hope for other families of missing persons, a reminder that even in the darkest circumstances, hope and determination can sometimes, against all odds, bring loved ones home. The blue sweater that had been found along the Elizabeth River, the clue that had kept the investigation alive when it might otherwise have gone cold, was preserved by the Miller family as a symbol of both their darkest hours and their ultimate triumph. "It represents everything we went through," Eleanor explained. "The fear, the loss, but also the fact that we never gave up." For the Miller family, life would never return to what it had been before that September morning when Tanya first mentioned her neighbor's strange looks. But they had forged something new from their shared trauma. A deeper appreciation for each moment together, an unbreakable bond strengthened by trial, and a commitment to helping others that would define their lives going forward. And in neighborhoods across America, parents listened more carefully when their children expressed discomfort or fear. "My neighbor looks at me strangely" was no longer dismissed as teenage paranoia or overactive imagination. It was recognized for what it could be: the first warning sign of danger lurking behind an ordinary facade. For every Richard Henderson who had been caught, there were others still hiding in plain sight. But thanks to Tanya Miller's courage and her family's relentless pursuit of justice, fewer predators would find it easy to operate undetected, and fewer families would have to endure the agony of searching for a loved one who had vanished without a trace. The story of Tanya Miller, of her disappearance, her survival, and her homecoming, became more than a sensational case that had captured national attention. It became a lesson, a warning, and ultimately a testament to the endurance of the human spirit and the power of a family's love to transcend even the darkest of circumstances.